Hello there everybody, welcome back to Good Game Have Fun. I'm the Hat Person, and here's my review of Yomawari Midnight Shadows for PS4, PS Vita, and PC on Steam. And this review will be of the PlayStation Vita version played entirely on the PlayStation TV. So the short version of this review goes like this. It's like the first one, but better, and the first one was pretty damn good. It takes everything from the first game and improves upon it in small ways that makes it more interesting and gripping. Sometimes it follows the patterns of the previous game a little bit too closely, but this heart-wrenching and emotional experience is still capable of standing strong on its own. And now the long version of the review goes like this. I don't like horror games, but I love Yomawari Midnight Shadows. I am never game when it comes to getting scared, but sometimes the planets align and I find something eternally intriguing like the Yomawari games. The first installment was a piece of bittersweet, disturbing, and yet beautiful art that I think about very often. My standards were high when playing Midnight Shadows, but I can safely say that this newest game is on that same level and still strives to go slightly beyond that. For starters, Midnight Shadows is not exactly a sequel, but rather a different story, cast, and setting that follows similar patterns from the first game. In Japan, the game is actually called Shin Yomawari, which can be translated as New Yomawari, in a similar way to how Mario Brothers turns into Super Mario Brothers, or Megami Tensei turns into Shin Megami Tensei. You could almost consider this game as less of a sequel and more of a soft reboot with some improvements. Because of this, you don't really need to play the previous game to know what's going on here. And despite its many similarities, Midnight Shadows is very much its own thing. The game captures your attention immediately by insisting that you turn off all lights and promise that you will never avert your eyes from the screen. Very similar to the first game, the opening tutorial is very simple but also very powerful, and sets the tone for the entire game. Honestly, I'd rather hang myself than to spoil what happens, but needless to say, it'll leave an impression on you and become the impetus for most of the mystery surrounding this game and its narrative. On paper, the story is very simple. There are two best friends named Yui and Haru who get separated on the way back home, to which then you switch between the two to look for one another. Being a Yomawari game, there's obviously no other way to do this than by wandering around a ghost-infested town at night with nothing but a flashlight and a handful of items. That's pretty much all there is to know in the grand scheme of things, but as you keep playing, you will very soon discover that there's more lying beneath the surface. As I said, the story sounds simple, but there are so many things in between all that simplicity that enriches the world and keeps pushing you forward. Each area of the town is more akin to a level you have to get through, all of them with their own sets of enemies, obstacles, and unsettling stories. The most exciting part is that you don't get to see everything during the first playthrough. After beating the game once, you are allowed to freely explore, fill in the rest of the map, and find the many collectibles scattered throughout. Seriously, during my one playthrough from beginning to end, I got less than half of the collectibles. I still have so much more to go and so many other places to explore that I never saw the first time I played. Everything discovered from the town helps in making the world more interesting. Even though you only see 2 human characters and only a dog in the entire game, the town still feels very lived in. Only through inspecting signs, notes, pictures, and buildings will you know more about where you are and why even certain enemies fight the way that they do. This is a good way of keeping the player invested, further pushing them toward the game's resolution. Again, I don't want to spoil anything, but you definitely want to see how the story ends. It will leave you with some very uncomfortable feelings and really make you think about how far you would go for the people that you love. Speaking of loving things, I would like to address the game's beautiful art direction and sound design. Both these elements placed together made for a great time that maybe even surpasses the original. There was a great attention to detail here, like having different footstep sounds for every texture on the floor, electricity passing through lights, and many other atmospheric noises that kept pulling me in. Just like the previous game, Midnight Shadows does an outstanding job in making the game scary through its sound or lack thereof. As expected, there's pretty much zero music during the entire thing, except for the awesome ending credits theme. When it comes to the art, I think it is also amazing. Almost on the same level as a Vanillaware, think Odin Sphere or Muramasa Rebirth. They truly outdid themselves with the enemy designs and all the different environments that you explore. Everything still feels like Yomawari, but they implemented a much more vibrant color palette to set a different tone for this new town. Instead of only blues and yellows and a lot of muted colors, Midnight Shadows adds a bit more red, orange, and other strong colors that pop nicely on the screen, whether it's on a television or on a PlayStation Vita taking it on the go. However, as much as I love this game, there are still a few criticisms that I would like to give, since some of these are problems that still persist from the previous game. For one, the game definitely starts to drag on to the point of sleep-inducing boredom towards the end. It isn't until you start to get to the final boss fights that it picks up the pace again. If the developers had cut off 1 or 2 hours of the second half of the game, I wouldn't feel like I missed much. I definitely wouldn't miss that stupid sewer level, that's for sure. For second, I pointed out in my review of Night Alone that there were no consequences for dying, leaving the checkpoints as more of a way to break the game. In Midnight Shadows, they sort of fixed that issue with another one. Sometimes these checkpoints show up frequently, making the game super easy. But there are other times where they are so few and far in between that it can make going through tough levels a tedious hassle, especially near the end. The fact that the game gets hard is not the problem. The problem is that there are way too many moments where I had to walk very long and empty hallways just to get back to where I was to try it out again, only to die and then have to walk all the way back again. It's unnecessary and a waste of time to make them be so far apart. An alternative that I can propose is maybe losing a certain amount of items every time you die, considering how I never ran out of coins, I never ran out of rocks, I was always at my limit when it comes to my inventory. I would always find a bunch of stuff laying around all the time. I would always have to leave coins behind because I always have too many on me. So I think it would have been better to just, if you die, just, cut off, maybe not half, but just, take away 1 or 2, Every time you die, you have less and less coins. And make the checkpoints maybe a little bit more frequent. That would have been better than just killing you off and then going super way back and then having to trudge a long way back to where you used to be just to make another attempt at a particularly difficult part of the game. And again, the problem is not that the game is hard, the problem is that the game is hard and that they make you just waste your time walking all the way back. Gameplay-wise, both games are exactly the same. You still have your flashlight and an assortment of items for distracting ghosts. Of course, you're still not able to fight anyone, so get ready to avoid anything that moves. Though I do appreciate some of the newer features like, box pushing and giving charms to your character that gives you upgrades, it still doesn't really do enough to mix up the formula. At the end of the day, you're still just running away from ghosts a lot, so there really aren't many moments where you have the necessity of trying out new tricks. You kind of just do the same thing that you've always done. And finally, I feel like most of the main beats of the game parallel way too much with the previous one. The reasons for why I call Midnight Shadows an alternate universe version of Night Alone is mostly due to how both games are practically identical in terms of their structure. I would have appreciated a more original way of laying out the story, or at least try and break a few of the patterns that Night Alone set. If anything, Midnight Shadows feels like more of an expansion of the original Yomawari than an entirely different game. Eventually, it does distinguish itself in some areas, especially close to the end, but you will definitely get a sense of deja vu from playing the first few hours. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. The game also has some inexplicable fascination with a certain boss character to the point that they keep making you fight him many times throughout the whole story. Believe me, you will learn to despise this boss, and you'll know who I'm talking about when you see him. Considering the wide variety of bosses the original Yomawari had, it's very upsetting that they resorted to recycling the same dude way too many times. But anyway, to conclude on this review, regardless of my relatively minor criticisms, I think Yomawari Midnight Shadows is a solid follow-up that deserves to be played and appreciated for how distinct, atmospheric, and flat-out brutal it is. If you guys already played Yomawari Night Alone and you enjoyed it, then you're definitely gonna love Midnight Shadows, for it takes a small but very firm step forward into growing what its predecessor has planted. Initially, it does feel like more of the same, but as you keep playing, it gets more interesting and more intriguing and starts to come up with more unique things, and it starts to scare you in ways that you didn't think this game was capable of. It is disturbing, thought-provoking, and emotional. It is also a hell of a lot of fun. I recommend this game, especially during the Halloween season. Do as the game actually recommends you to do, and turn off the lights, and don't avert your eyes from the screen. There you go, guys. That was my review. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you liked this video, then of course, give it a like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, all that good stuff. And of course, if you want to find out where my social media stuff is at, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff, you don't have to remember all these URLs. You only got to go to one place. That is goodgamehavefun.com. And from there, you'll be able to find everything else. Or you can just go to all of the links down in the description. And before I leave, I do want to give a special thanks to NIS America for providing me the review code that I used to be able to make a review of this game. Thank you very much for your support.